Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Fierce and Flowing podcast. I have another super rich and exciting podcast for you today. I just met Anna through a friend just a week ago, pretty much, and just fell in love with who she is, what she represents, and the amazing work that she is doing in the world and that she's going to continue to do in the world around a topic that is so very important. Honestly, it's life or death. I think we would both agree that. Um, and that is sleep. So before we get into this conversation and welcome Anna, let me share with you who she is. And then we're going to jump right into this conversation. And by the way, don't go anywhere because Anna's going to share one of her gifts and talents with us at the end of this podcast that you're not going to want to miss. So stick around. So, Ahna de Vena is known as the sleep legend, part sleep therapist, part peak performance coach. She helps people trade tiredness and burnout for deeply restorative sleep, overflowing energy, and even super brain powers, which we've got to talk about. Anna's here to show us why sleep isn't just a nightly routine, but the secret weapon for living completely and fiercely alive. And I hear that you're also known as the human tranquilizer.
Yes.
Where
So
did
be
that come
careful because
from?
as you listen, you might fall asleep. No. Yeah, I just have this gift. And I really think of it as a gift. And
Yeah.
it's something about my voice. It's something I'm not sure, but people just, if you think about my career, hundreds and hundreds of my clients I've put to sleep. And
Wow.
that's like such a blessing. They come in and they're
Yeah.
so stressed, they're
Yes.
so anxious, and then within an hour they're asleep in front of me because I feel like it's very important to give people that felt experience.
Yes.
And they often say, I just recall how I was and
Right.
how I felt during the session, and it helps me so much. So yeah, it's
What an incredible gift. And I love that you claim it as a superpower. I think that's one of the things that we don't do enough for ourselves. We often just spin in circles questioning our gifts and we know what they are. We're connected to them because they bring us some such sparks of joy or moments like that where you're patting yourself on the back saying, "Look at what I was able to do for someone else." And so, being able to claim our superpowers is something that I hope everyone takes away from this conversation too, in addition to how do
yeah.
we learn how to sleep better? Why is it so important? How can we support our children in that and the world? So
And
Anna,
giving our
let's
children the
yeah,
superpower of being able to sleep. I mean, in this world, being able to sleep really well is actually a superpower, especially for kids.
yeah,
70% of school age kids are sleep deprived, 90% of teenagers are sleep deprived. So it is actually a superpower that kids need to cultivate and as adults
right,
help them,
right.
but adults are struggling too.
They
So
are. They are.
yeah.
And I can't wait to like make the connection too, because that was one of my questions when I was getting ready for our conversation is when we help a child, right? How does that support the parents and vice versa, right? And there's this symbiotic relationship, I'm sure, this unconscious spiritual relationship that emerges when, we have self-care for ourselves and our children start to see it and benefit from it and vice versa, right? So sometimes it doesn't matter who you start with. It ends up supporting, I'm sure, the entire family.
Well, I mean, really, the parent needs to be a parent
Yeah.
and be guiding, and I talk about bedtime transference.
Mm-hmm.
We don't acknowledge enough how much transference is happening to the child. So, a child's tired, usually overtired, overstimulated,
Yeah.
and then the parent is stressed, and then the parent yells at the child, go to sleep. And so when that happens, their whole system actually gets more stressed.
Yeah. Yeah. They're in,
So,
I would
so
imagine like fight, flight, or freeze at that point.
yeah. and they're
Yeah.
feeling really anxious about the fact they can't sleep. So bedtime, needs to start way before bedtime in terms
Right.
of what's happening in the house,
Yeah.
how the house lighting is, how you're speaking. And so my sleep kit for kids, the first part of that kit is for the parent, for
Okay.
them to help manage their anxiety and their stress so that they come into a state where it's so much more easy for the child to calm down in their presence.
Right.
And that transference can be very positive. So,
Before we jump into your story, which I really want to do, and I know that that's part of your fierceness that you're going to share with us today and how it led to your mission. Um, I'm curious from your perspective, what's that magic amount of time for children and for the parent that we need in order to help that transference happen, right? That process on a daily basis before bedtime.
well, an hour is really helpful.
Okay.
And to signal the body, to
Mm-hmm.
signal the mind in all the ways that we need, or at least the most basic. So, one of the most basic signals that our body needs to switch from wake up hormones to sleepy hormones is subdued light.
Okay.
Because we have brain cells in our eyes
Mm.
that are always looking to the amount of light in the space we're in to
Yeah.
then signal the part of our brain that regulates our sleep wake cycle on what hormone to produce. So when we're in a bright room, the brain is getting the signal to make cortisol, which
Yes.
is our wake up hormone, and blue light, which is in light bulbs
Right.
and screens, tells our body to make the opposite hormone to what we need for sleep. So just lowering the lights, getting some amber light bulbs, closing the curtains, just
Mm-hmm.
making everything soft
Yes.
signals the body to start making the hormones needed for sleep. And if you think about it, that process takes time.
Yeah.
So if you've got kids with bright lights or screens or whatever, and then you say, get to bed, of course they're going to resist
Yeah.
because their
They're not ready.
body is in a state that's opposite. Of course they're going to be like, and it becomes a battle. So if you set up the environment correctly, then hormonally they're already in a place where they can start to go to sleep, and they get tired.
Yeah.
They actually start rubbing their eyes and saying, oh, I think I want to go to sleep now, once all the stimulation's taken away.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just listening to you and going, "Oh my God." And that's just good medicine for the mom too, right? Like start turning off those lights, like I can almost picture the mom and the child kind of falling asleep together on the couch, even before
Yes.
bedtime when we allow ourselves,
Yeah.
that sacred space. Beautiful. Sometimes it's just really simple daily habits that we have to put into practice. So thank you for sharing those for sure. So let's backtrack, and I would love for you to share with everyone a little bit more about who you are, your journey, your backstory, and that those, right? Because I know there's several fierce moments, fierce journeys that you've been on that really kind of led you to this being your mission and bringing these superpowers that you have to the world.
Yeah, so I had sleeping issues as a child, which is one of the reasons I feel so passionate about helping children sleep better. I had a bit of a traumatic childhood, which triggered insomnia, and that kind of kept going into my early 20s. And by then, my body was pretty stressed.
Mhm.
And I had a breakdown in my early 20s, physically and mentally, and ended up in hospital.
Mhm.
And I was diagnosed with a couple of autoimmune diseases and told that I needed to take medication for the rest of my life. And I had this moment of just deciding that I didn't want to do that. And I feel like I connected with a part of me that knew that I had an ability to sleep well and to be well
Mhm.
naturally. So I really connected with that. And I started to study natural medicine. I'd already done a degree at university. I was already
Okay.
working in film and TV and theater, but I just said, okay, well, I'm going to do this for me. So I studied several forms of natural medicine and I recovered my ability to sleep well over years. And I got well without medication. I overcame that autoimmune condition that I was told I needed to
Right.
take medication for. So it was an issue with my thyroid. And
Mm-hmm.
I got all of that balanced out. And then I decided, or I realized, wow, why isn't this taught in school?
Right.
Why we're meant to spend a third of our lives asleep, and yet we don't get a sleep education.
No.
And so I went to schools. I knocked on the door. I spoke to the principals and I said, hey, this is what happened to me. And I really want to help the kids at this school to be able to manage their stress and sleep well.
Right.
And so I began for my first couple of years working in schools. And then from that, teachers started asking me for help,
Right.
parents started asking me for help. And I started my first clinical practice
Okay.
with my own approach, which I developed myself through study, through my own recovery. And then
Right.
over a decade of intense clinical practice, both in Sydney and in New Zealand, and
Mm-hmm.
then in Europe, I developed holistic sleep therapy.
Okay.
And that is now recognized. And then from that, I had a client who she was a businesswoman, very well respected in New Zealand. And she asked me if I'd start doing some talks. So I went through all my client notes. I looked at what worked for the majority of people and started building out my talks from my notes on what had
Okay.
actually helped my clients. And then I made a CD in a similar way, went through all my notes, and that CD got onto Qantas and was putting people to sleep in the sky.
Oh
I
my
worked at
gosh, how
the
beautiful.
I worked at the international organizations in Geneva. And then there was a point, it was about, 12 years in, I had a deeper level of healing happen for myself, for my inner child. And I had a moment where I was sitting with my 7-year-old self and speaking to her. And from that came this book called the Sleep and Dream book,
Okay.
which I then started to donate to frontline organizations that help children and families dealing with trauma. And it started really helping kids and families. And I then created an audio and then an extra book. And then I formed a charity, the Sleep and Dream Foundation. And the mission of that charity is to help children and families who've experienced trauma to get good sleep so they can actually recover. Because when a child has trauma and sleep deprivation, they can get very, very, very unwell, which I'm an example of.
Right.
And managing that dysregulation and that
Yeah.
inflammation, usually it turns into self-medicating and some pretty horrendous things, and it completely disrupts development of the brain and just everything. So I'm very passionate about that. I love working inside of that foundation. I would love to be doing it more and more and more, which I am. So yeah, we have a couple of programs. My big mission at the moment is to make every crisis accommodation, every women's shelter in Australia sleep supportive, and then to spread that out to the US and the UK.
That's
So
amazing. Amazing. I was thinking of you actually in between our first conversation and today because I had the pleasure, true pleasure of visiting our local women's prison. I'd never been to a prison before in my life, and within this prison, because of a foundation, this foundation is giving women who have been incarcerated for a very long time an opportunity to work while they're incarcerated, make money for their families, but also professionalize themselves so that and learn personal and professional skills. Once they exit, they're going to be in a much better place to be able to be reintegrated. But listening to them, what they're going through, how they're healing, how they're beginning to forgive themselves, recognize how they have hurt others, and all of that stress. I was thinking of myself, my gosh, the trauma that they're going through. I wonder how they're sleeping, right? And how affected they are because of what they're going through, and just how sleep affects everybody. Everybody. I'm wondering, going back to the children, because I know so many, women executives that listen to my podcast are mothers. They have children of all ages. And as we know today, a lot of women who are dealing with hormonal changes. Many of them who have thyroid issues, because it's just one of the things that shows up for all of us, are also struggling with sleep. I'm curious, with the children that you started working with in the schools early on, what were some of the immediate outcomes that you saw from them that came through, your work with the children?
So the children were very receptive, and they they were like sponges. You know, they were just like, because it was a subject that no one had really talked to them about.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something they were just expected to be able to do. So to have someone ask them, what happens when you lay down in bed and close your eyes? What
Mm-hmm.
happens inside?
Mm.
They just were like, oh, well, I start thinking about this, or I start daydreaming about that. And, they're also different. They're such individual beings that it's quite wonderful being in a room full of them and talking about it, and then being able to speak to the different types.
Yeah,
There's some of them who, like, one of my things was I was just always creative.
right.
I was thinking up so many things, and it was a way of me dealing with the trauma, but it's just also who I am. Like,
Yes.
I'm creating all of the time. So, you've got the kids that are creating a lot, you've got the ones who are worrying a lot, you've got the ones that are, you know, um, kind of just dreamers.
Yeah, and you've
So,
got the warriors who just want to run and be successful and win and,
yes, yes, like the
yes,
big achievers,
yes, the big
thinking of
achievers.
the next big thing, and the competitive ones and the sporty ones. And, it's so lovely to just, I think that we forget that that time of the night, it's a time where you can connect so much more deeply to your child,
Yeah.
because it opens up a realm, their inner world. So
Mm-hmm.
the Sleep and Dream book talks about their inner world. It starts with, you have an inner world that's yours,
Right.
and how are you in there?
Yeah.
And I had a pretty tough time in my outer world. So I made my inner world a place where I could rest and dream and feel safe.
I love
And
it.
the book gives them 9 different skills for
Okay.
being able to calm down and go to sleep. And to be honest,
Yeah.
it helps adults as well,
Yeah.
because it speaks to the child in every single one of us.
Right. Right.
And,
Absolutely.
you talked about the symbiotic relationship. And I think when a parent decides to help themselves with sleep, it has an impact on the child. When they decide to help their child with sleep, it
Yeah.
helps them with sleep.
Sure.
So it's very
Yeah. Part of
symbiotic.
it, I mean, in listening to you share that about the book, it's giving kids permission, and parents too, to rest, and these are the things that we just don't talk about, to go into this other world that is a very important world, and whereas before it's about, we just need to close our eyes so we can start again tomorrow morning with the things
Yeah.
we have to do,
Yeah.
right? Instead of approaching sleep from a healing perspective, from a renewal perspective. And oh, I am so excited because I get to maybe think about tomorrow morning what I dreamed of, right? As a child, like that would make me want to close my eyes and turn off the lights and go to bed and say,
Yeah.
okay, mom, I'm going to bed.
Yeah. Yeah. We think of sleep as something we have to tick off the list.
Right, right.
and B, nothing is happening.
Right. Yeah.
And that is very sad
Yeah.
because we've lost the capacity to enjoy being spacious, being still, and just contemplating or enjoying the stars, for instance. I'll say to people, just look out the window or open your door and just look at the night sky
Yeah.
and get that perspective. We're on an earth, we're on a planet that's spinning through a universe. We get so cut off from the reality
Yeah.
of the earth and where we are and the much bigger picture that the night sky can give us. And then that piece about, oh, we just got to tick it off, we've just got to get to sleep, and we've got, it's like, can I enjoy my bed?
Yeah.
Can I first of all make my bed in my bedroom a sanctuary
Mm-hmm.
for rest?
Yes.
Where we don't have a whole lot of distractions and a screen and or more than one screen, and make it a sanctuary. We're really honoring that incredible thing that happens while we're asleep. It's not nothing.
Right.
There is so much going on. Like for children, it's when they grow.
Yeah.
Human growth hormone is happening. So when they don't get the amount of sleep they're not growing well.
Right.
Their brain's not developing well. And as adults, it's a time of repair. Every day there's damage. It's a time of repair. It's a time of protection.
Yeah.
So when we don't have enough melatonin in our system, we can get cancer because of that. We can have a stroke because of that. We get obesity because of that. There's so many things like that are connected to not having that restoration and that flush of protective and restorative hormones that come
Yeah.
into our body while we're sleeping. And like, for instance, the lymphatic system switches on, which cleanses our brain of toxins that build up every single day. And
Mm-hmm.
one of them is called beta amyloid and is connected to Alzheimer's.
Wow.
So how much more inspiration do you need,
Yeah, no, it really is, and I know you also work with companies and with executives and professionals because it is an epidemic. It's a
It
I
is.
almost everyone I speak to is having, sleep struggles. I even shared with you that I've had, sleep issues for quite some time and starting to figure out a few things that are, supporting me and helping me to, to rest a little bit more. One of the things that I changed recently was my meditation practice. And because I noticed that the way that I was meditating was actually creating more stress for me. And so I ended up connecting with a teacher and doing meditation in silence, which is not what I was doing before. But I recognized that when I actually sat in silence, it became such a form of deep, deep rest that I wasn't getting at night. And so really being able for me to, in the late afternoon, around 3 or 4 p.m., to just give myself 20 to 30 minutes of deep stillness and silence, I felt like a brand new person. And it almost didn't have such a, you know, horrible effect not sleeping, let's say 8 hours at night, because I got that deep rest in the afternoon and I could sleep 6 hours and still be, feeling good the next day. But it is an epidemic. And, you talked about making our bedroom's a sacred place. I know that you and I talked about how in feng shui, that's one of the biggest principles, that I work with individuals on, not just for our sleep, but also if we are in a loving marriage or relationship, the bedroom is a sanctuary for that relationship as well, right? For the relationship we're building day by day with ourselves and with our partners. Aside from working on that, the sacredness of the room, for the person who wants to really think about if I'm going to change one or two habits that are going to support me in sleeping a little bit better, for that kind of executive woman who is, overstressed, exhausted, doing way too much, working way into the night, um, not really prioritizing themselves, what would you say are a couple of other changes that they could make that could support them in beginning to sleep a little
Well,
bit better?
the first changes need to be internal
Mm-hmm.
because, and, you know, if sleep hygiene worked, we'd all be fine
Yeah.
because you look up sleep hygiene, you get the list. My work goes way beyond sleep
Mm-hmm.
hygiene. However, why are people doing what they're doing? So it's about values
Mm-hmm.
and priority lists. So I feel that the very first thing is to take your rest, recovery, and sleep very seriously.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing it and you're finding it hard, read a book that gives you all the data. So Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep,
Yeah.
scares people into action.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can paralyze them because
Yeah.
they get, so I don't always say to read that, but if you're finding it hard to understand why sleep is important for your quality of life, you know, we our brain capacity drops dramatically when we get under the amount of sleep that we need, which is between 7.5 to 9 hours, depending on who we are and what our body type is. But our prefrontal cortex, which governs all executive functions, drops out. The center of our brain that regulates emotions
Yeah.
completely goes offline.
Yeah.
So we have a little bit of cognitive function left, but like executive function, but there are parts, and we know that.
We do.
Anyone
We
who's
yeah.
hearing that is going, yep, I've lost it when I'm tired.
Yeah, I feel
I've lost
fuzzy.
it.
Yeah, add in menopause and perimenopause to that mix,
Oh,
and we are screwed.
yes. So the first thing really is to start to prioritize it
Yeah, yeah,
and to understand its value and totally just have a moment of recognizing, wow, I'm not giving myself time to recover.
yeah. And I'm
Because
worth it.
laying on the couch and watching Netflix is not recovering.
No, no.
And Netflix is known, they've said our number one competitor is sleep,
Is sleep.
and
Oh
we're
God.
winning.
They are. They are.
CEO said that our
Yeah.
number one competitor is sleep, and we're winning.
Wow.
And I have to say, like, when I heard that, it just broke my heart, to have a company
Yeah.
that is destroying humanity's wellness and quality of life. I mean, there
Yeah.
are a lot of companies doing that. Let's not talk about even
No,
sleep.
you're right. Yeah, it's a
But yeah, so the first thing is to take it seriously.
yeah.
And the second thing is to actually carve out some time for rest.
Yeah.
So you said, your little period of rest in the afternoon gives you that ability to feel calmer.
Yeah.
And we're not meant to be going
No.
from the moment we get up to the moment we lay in bed.
Yeah.
And that's what people are doing. And then they lay down and then they get annoyed and frustrated and stressed out that they're not asleep in a second.
Right.
Their body needs time. I talk about the bridge to sleep.
Yeah.
The second thing is that I would say give yourself a bridge to sleep, which is a period of time where you allow your body to unwind, you allow your mind to unwind. And, even 10 minutes. So I led a leadership event last week, and, I showed them how quickly their body can unwind. Like I literally put them to sleep within 15 minutes from totally high beta,
Yeah.
learning, bright lights to down. So learning those skills, learning, having that capacity. And when you're intelligent and you put your mind to something,
Yeah.
you make it important and a priority, guess what happens?
Yeah. Well, and it's
You
really
learn
living
that
a
thing.
life of proactivity. I think in today's day and age, Wellness is at the top of the list. We know it. We know it. In order to thrive, to live joyous, healthy lives, we need to focus on ourselves, on our well-being, the whole person, the mind, the body, the spirit. And going back to what you said, it's like, how many examples do we really need, right? We have maybe parents or grandparents who are struggling with Alzheimer's, and maybe we're avoiding asking ourselves, am I next? And what can I do about it? Right. So the more we avoid, the less time we're giving ourselves to actually make a difference for, you
It's
know,
also that, we've got this momentum,
yeah,
right? And I talk about when I first start working with clients, I say, you're like a ship and you've been moving through the ocean at a certain pace in a certain way. And what we're going to do is slow it down.
yeah.
We're going to slow it down and we're going to change direction.
Hmm.
And it takes something.
Hmm.
And so I would also say, to these people that are just on this trajectory of burnout, basically, to put the brakes on
Yeah,
and then ask yourself, do I need help with this? Can I do this on my own, or is this important enough for me to get help? Whether it's me or someone else,
yeah,
like, but just get the help, and as adults, we need to be open to learning, to being coached, to
yeah.
change where we're heading. So slow it down, really get real with yourself about where you're at and what you need, and think about a year's time, 2 years' time. But where do I want to be? Do I want to be burnt out?
Right.
Or do
What's my
I want to
vision?
be like the best version of myself, And if I keep going like this, how am
Yeah.
I going to be?
It's
So it is,
really it's really amazing. I often talk about slow living. It's something that I'm an advocate of. Obviously, my brand is flowing, right? So I believe in creating space for ourselves, prioritizing ourselves. I people often look at me like, how can you give yourself 2 hours in the morning before, just for you? I'm like, because I cannot be who I want to be if I don't. And yeah, that means I have to wake up, really early. That means that I have to prioritize, my mind, body, and spirit work. But it helps me to go slow so that then I can go fast with the things that are really important to me.
yep,
I'll never forget, and I say this because again, the examples are so much like we all have examples. Every conversation I have with someone, they've gone through something, someone in their family has gone through something. I remember when my grandmother was sick and was in and out of the hospital and rehab for 7 months until she finally, unfortunately, passed away. But my mother was with her day and night, and and we talk about it now. What could you have done differently? How could you have supported yourself differently? Because um, not getting any sleep at all, not eating well, and doing that day after day after day to support someone you love who's going through something excruciating, but also at your expense, right? And she ended up with severe adrenal fatigue where she almost couldn't come back from it, right? And
yep,
you can take that example and just say, you know, put in the executive who's working 12-hour days consistently, not eating well, not exercising, definitely not sleeping, or, how long are we going to go with having a vision of what our life, the kind of life we want, but not taking the actual steps to make those
yep.
changes?
And
Yeah.
it's also, connecting with what's driving that.
Yeah.
Like what's driving that compulsion?
Yeah. That's a great
So
word. Yeah. It's
for
compulsion.
your mother, there was something driving it. Yes,
Oh,
you could say it's
absolutely.
love, but there'll be other things mixed in with that, And so until that's also felt and
Hmm.
acknowledged and they're supported to shift that, whatever's driving it,
Yeah.
then, sometimes that's a perspective shift. Sometimes that's a leftover big emotion that's there and stirring things and pushing things. So being able to go into those deeper aspects and see what is it that's making me work 12-hour days and not eat and lay in bed and think about work? And, like for me, I find it, I have to be so diligent. I'm so passionate about what I'm doing. I thought the other day, wow, if I just worked 24/7 for the next year, I still wouldn't have everything that I want to do done.
Right.
And I was talking to these leaders about our relationship to the never-ending list. It is a bit different to caring for someone that we love, but
Yeah.
there's a never-ending list. And how do we relate to that?
Right.
And that's a really important thing to get. Like that list is going to be there, depending on who we are, till we die.
Absolutely. And it should be, right? We're passionate, creative individuals, and we're constantly, I going back to who you are, I just have to, talk about astrology for a moment because I always um, look at all of my guests through the lens of the five elements, right? This is a form of astrology that really ties us back to just who we are innately in a very, very simplistic way. And as I was getting to know you and reading what you've written for me, and I said, I know her elements. I can feel her elements, and I want to share them with you because it's just so beautifully aligned with who you are and who you've become and your passion and your mission. So your primary energy, which is what mostly drives you, is you're the archetype of the creator, the creative, and the dreamer. Okay, so it's exactly what you said. It's that person who is constantly like ideating, and I want to do all these things, and I have this vision for my life, and I want to go out there and look at the stars because it connects me to the expansiveness of the universe. And it's a very spiritual energy as well, right? It's tied to mysticism in the sense of we don't have all the answers, and we're constantly looking for that connection to the answers, right? So that's your primary energy. Very connected to dancing, by the way, I just have to say.
Oh, wow. I told
As
you
a
I'm
as
a
a fellow
dancer.
dancer,
Yeah.
you and I have the same primary energy, so not shocked there.
Okay.
Your inner child energy, which we were talking about, is the performer. Okay, and that's the fire, right? And sometimes in a child, when we see it in that child um, aspect and archetype, the child, him or herself, can experience a lot of anxiety growing up, right? Have a hard time sleeping, maybe even heart palpitations, and redness and rashes and anything related to
Well, you can
fire.
see that I'm quite warm anyway. I mean, I've got lights on me, but yeah.
But
Yeah.
a part of who you are, this is all about who you are here to be. And of course, these archetypes come with the shadow aspect, like everything else, right? But you're here to be a performer. You're here to be the dreamer, and I just love it how you help people fall asleep. It's
Yeah.
just
But I really bring this subject to life,
yes.
right? So when I was speaking to these leaders, literally I was speaking to them for nearly 4 hours, but with props, with my
Yes. Being
body,
the
like
performer.
bringing it to life. But then there were times where I was taking them to sleep. So it's
Yeah.
this beautiful, I was going to say that
It's
before.
water and fire.
Yeah, yeah. I have that. I have both.
Yeah,
And
the
I think
last
that's why it
archetype.
works. Yeah.
Yeah. The last archetype that you have is the leader, which is what I want to talk about now because you have this incredible vision and you have this beautiful foundation, right? And of course, someone with the life purpose of leadership, that's your life purpose, is to be the person who helps people to understand like where do you want to go? What's the kind of life that you want to have? And if you want to have that kind of life, let's make that connection back to your choices, your purpose, the decisions you're making. And so you created this sleep and dream foundation. And like I'm curious as to because not everybody is going to create a foundation. Why was it so important for you? Like what really sparked that idea and that momentum behind the
Well,
foundation?
I just want to backtrack slightly.
Yeah.
So, to what you just said, which, you know, I help people with sleep, but ultimately, I'm waking people up
Yes.
to their
Yes.
need for rest so they can live 100%
Yes.
alive.
Yeah.
I want to live in a world with alive people.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
so
alive, full of
there is
energy.
a slightly selfish part to what I do because I walk down the street and see people looking grey and lifeless. This is the world I live in. You know, I want this world to feel alive and people to be happy around me and
Yeah.
well. And I see kids and they've got these dark circles under their
Yes.
eyes. And they
They're
just look
exhausted.
so like exhausted. So there is that desire, you know, that is very deep in me. And having experienced it myself
Yeah.
and having, you know, being who I am and having the energy I have, I've had to get good at this, you
Yeah.
know, and I know the struggle from many different angles.
Sure.
So, but the foundation, it's quite emotional. Like I can feel the emotion coming up because, you know, it really began with compassion for my younger self. And as I was sitting there, I had this moment where I went back in time. And as the adult me, I had my arm around my 7-year-old self and I was holding her. And as I was doing that, I had this vision of all the children who experience domestic violence and trauma, who are then taken from their usual home and they're in either a shelter or foster care or somewhere unfamiliar, surrounded by unfamiliar people, and they're told, go to sleep. They're in the dark. Their little bodies are so traumatized. And how can they calm down?
Right.
So
Right.
I made them this little book. And I also made an audio where I'm speaking to them. And there's a lot of gentleness in that, in my voice, in that recording. And yeah, and then I was just like, I just need to give this. So I just gave it. Like I was tithing for years. And then a friend said, you can have an even bigger impact if you make
Right.
this in a foundation where people can donate, people can help you to with this mission. So I went through the process. Like it's a fully registered, we call it DGR status, so people get tax deduction from donations. And that was a
Right.
massive process. But I
Yes.
was paying the whole time, you know, for guidance. And there was one point where I had this day where I was like, am I crazy? And then I just said, okay, God, I need a sign. I need a very clear sign, more than a white feather in the sand, because
Right.
often I have white feathers in the sand. And literally that day, I got a phone call from the government, like a real human called me and said, the work you're doing is incredible. We've just granted you the DGR status. You're now fully registered. Go do
Wow.
your and it was
Wow.
like, okay, God, you know? And yeah, and then I just get so much I get so full of energy when I'm working on things for the foundation. And just recently I thought I would just so love for my work to be foundation work and then with leaders because the
Yes.
impact I can have, like I'm working with a couple of leaders now one on one, the impact that has, you know, it ripples out to
It
their
does
team
ripple out. Yeah.
just and then their team, it ripples out from them. And so I've got this new, well, it's not new because it's already happening.
Okay.
um but yeah, I would like to do even more of that. Yeah.
It's amazing. So before I have you share your sleep poem with us, what else are you up to that you want to share with the world? What's coming up for you? How can we connect with you? I'm already like, if you want to make a donation to the foundation, if you need a sleep kit for your child, if you really, really need to work on your sleep habits, and you need a coach, Anna, I know Anna's available, but where do you want to guide us next with who you are and where you're going and how we can connect with you?
Well, all of those things you've just said.
Mhm.
So you can look at my website, Ahna de Vena, that's AHNADEVENA.com. And that's kind of a hub for
Okay.
everything I'm doing. So, you know, maybe you want to introduce a wellness program that's sleep and performance related. I also have a program that helps with nighttime meetings. So
Mm,
a lot of companies run nighttime meetings and expect their employees to attend. And then, how do you sleep well and then wake up the next day with energy? So I have an evening meeting initiative. And then I have the Sleep to Thrive program, which has been so fantastic. And then my executive coaching, my sleep kit for kids. And then I also do consulting for families to help you get on track quickly. And one of my favorite things is that I run personal retreats for leaders, for people who are having high impact and who really want to get into the best place, like mentally, physically,
mhm.
emotionally. You talked a little bit about superpowers. Brain is one of the sleep is one of the things that gives our brain the ability to function really, really well.
Yeah.
So yeah, and those retreats, I come to you or you can come here, and it's really intensive, and there's a very fast shift, and I can work with your whole family, or um, you can come here and have a
Yeah.
really wonderful time. And then I support you for a couple of months with integration after that. So that's something I love doing and would love to do more of. So if you
Yeah, it's
want
like a
your life
whole
to
family
change,
transformation.
yes,
Yes.
yeah. Yep, I can
Beautiful.
come to you and help your whole family change your whole house.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's pretty wonderful when that happens. So
Love
I would
it.
love
Love
to
it.
do more of that. Yeah. And then the foundation, Sleep and Dream Foundation, it's based in Australia. But I will be expanding it out to the States. And I've actually just had someone who has a foundation in Afghanistan reach out to me, and I'm going to partner with them. And I'm running a sleep program called the Sleepy Little Owl for orphans in Afghanistan. So that has really expanded what I'm doing, because I've realized I can actually partner with other foundations
Right.
who are already established in other countries.
Yeah.
So that's very exciting. So if you have, some kind of foundation or some organization that you're working in where you think we could partner, then also just, check out the Sleep and Dream Foundation and get in touch with me.
Awesome. And I'm going to put all of your information in the show notes so they can just click on the link and get to Anna. Thank you so much. This is such an important conversation, and I'm so grateful that you shared your story and reminded us how important it is, especially for us leaders who want to operate at a high, executing level and not be fuzzy and not be stressed and have the energy so that we can, go after our dreams and make an impact in the world, which is what we're here to do as leaders, ultimately, is to make the world
And
a better
feel
place
good
and
as
feel
we do
good and
it.
dance.
Yes, feel good as we do it, because we can have an impact, but we can hurt ourselves. But what
Yeah.
if we can have an impact and feel amazing, like Wonder Woman? I've actually got Wonder Woman on my desktop.
Yes.
She's
Yes.
my person that gives me energy every day.
I
So
love it. I love it. Okay, so the floor is yours. We're going to wrap up this podcast with Anna sharing her sleep poem. And I can't wait. I'm so excited for this. So,
okay. So I just want to lead in with dusk is a time of day that gives us so much if we just attune to it. So it's the time when the natural world starts to quiet and the natural light starts to change. And if we can just give it a little bit of attention and attune to that changing in the natural world, it is a doorway for us
mm,
to then, slow down, change gears, and then gradually, eventually fall asleep. So this is called Dusk Whispers a Promise.
okay.
Dusk whispers a promise that only night can keep. When you feel the gentle dark embracing you, soothing you to sleep.
Beautiful. You do have such a magical voice. Gonna have to
I
grab that
usually say
CD and
it twice, but I felt like once was enough.
yes, you'll definitely put me into Savasana, Anna, for sure. It's one of my favorite. It is like my favorite position. Deep rest for the body, for the mind, for the soul. You are such a gift to the world. Thank you, thank you, thank you so
Thank you for
much.
having me. I really, really enjoyed today. It was wonderful.
Awesome. I know everyone's going to find so much value. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Please share this episode. I know that you know individuals who need to hear this. And if you enjoyed this podcast, give us those 5 stars. Share the link with your friends. Leave us a comment. I want to know what you loved about today's episode. And maybe you've already made a commitment to yourself to start, making some changes so that you can sleep better and just be a better human in the world because of it. So share with us, and I can't wait to see you again next week on the Fierce and Flowing podcast. See you then. Bye bye.
Bye.